So if we took a survey of parents and asked them what the biggest risks to their children's welfare is, I suspect we would get something like abduction by a predator. That's the parents' fear. A car accident, some type of catastrophic illness like cancer. I'm not sure what all would be on that list, but I think all of those pale in comparison to what is really the greatest risk to kids today in our society. And what is that risk? It is their cell phone. And today on Parenting for the Long Run, we are going to talk about that, and I am going to make the case for ditching the cell phones for your kids. So let's get into it.
I'm all in. Push your chips to the middle. I'm all in for the cards as they may. I'm all in. Push your chips to the middle. I'm all in. Go broke or get paid.
Welcome back to Parenting for the Long Run. Today we are going to talk about smartphones and the risk that they pose to your children. Before we get started, though, let us open our time in prayer and ask that the Lord would give us wisdom in this, and in particular, give me wisdom as I speak on this topic. Lord Jesus, thank you for your many blessings. I pray that this would be a time that is productive for those who listen to this podcast, and that I would speak only those words that you would have me speak. And we pray these things because of your sacrifice on our behalf. Amen. Okay, so there was a commercial. I tried to find this commercial, but was unable to do it. It was a radio spot, pretty compelling spot, actually. And it started with a very confident sounding lady talking about all the things that parents do to protect their children. I have to look at my notes to remember the exact words, but it said outlet covers, corner cushions, cabinet locks, stair gates. And it went on talking about all the things that parents do to try to keep their kids from getting injured in the household, and then pointed out that the one thing that they oftentimes overlooked was actually the most dangerous thing, and that was that they didn't have the proper size car seat. Well, we're not going to talk about car seats today. We're going to talk about another risk to children's welfare. And if I were to ask a random sampling of parents what their greatest fear for their children's safety is, I suspect many would say some type of abduction by a stranger. Now, I looked up the FBI statistic. They say that in 2024, there were 293 people under the age of 18 who were abducted by a stranger. So 293 in 2024. In 2024, the number of people in the United States under the age of 18 was just shy of 77 million people. The fact means that there is a 1 in 262 thousandths of a chance that your child, if we assume that this just occurs randomly, and I suspect that some of it is not random, some of it is a result of the stranger abducting a child, is because the parent or some family member is engaged in illicit activity. But let's just assume that it's all random. That would mean that 1 in 262,000 kids, the fact be abducted. Or to put it differently, your child has 4 chances out of 1,000,000 of being abducted by a stranger. So that's like the 4 millionths of 1%, if you put it in percentage terms. Almost zero. Now, to the people who have had their child abducted, those statistics do not make any difference to them, but it kind of puts in perspective the risk of your child being abducted by a stranger. Now, contrast that against the number of people under the age of 18, adolescents or children, pre-adolescents, who have either been approached online by someone who is trying to groom them, or been received quote-unquote sexting messages, or posting an image of themselves in a provocative, sexually explicit manner. So the University of New Hampshire at Durham interviewed 2,600 young adults from the ages of 18 to, I think, 30, and asked how many of them had been sexually exploited as teenagers or children. And they found out that 15% had fallen prey to online child sexual exploitation and abuse, and 7% had actually posted photos of themselves because they were coerced or convinced that that was what they should do. The fact I have a background in econometrics. Econometrics is the use of statistics in economics. And that and $5 will get you a coffee at Starbucks. But it does kind of compel me to say these 2,600 people that they interviewed it's very unlikely that they are what we call a representative sample of the United States. For example, they probably didn't interview any Amish people, right? And so that right there skews the results. But it skews it probably in understating the number of kids who have cell phones who are actually either sexually exploited, have someone contact them trying to groom them for in-person sexual exploitation, or who post a photo of themselves. But even if we divide that in half, let's just say it wasn't 15% of the people who were of the total population who posted a picture of themselves. Maybe it was only 7.5%. Maybe it was only 3.5%. Even in that case, it is several orders of magnitude more likely that your child will be exploited sexually online through the use of either a computer or more likely a cell phone than that they will be abducted by a stranger. And yet, almost all of parents' attention is upon the risk that approaches zero, and they put very little effort into the more substantial risk to their child's welfare. Now, why do they do that? I have some theories about why they do that I will discuss later, but what I want to point out now is perhaps we as parents need to focus on the greater risk to our children, and that is the risk that a cell phone poses to them. So the parents of toddlers and very young kids might say, well, I just use a tablet or a smartphone to kind of keep my kid entertained and keep them out of trouble. And so they are in no danger of sexual exploitation in that situation. So really, no harm, no foul. Well, the fact is that it is probably true that they are in no danger of sexual exploitation. Okay, let's just say it's true. That does not mean that there is no harm. In fact, there is considerable harm in that practice. The first harm is both to you as a parent and to your children. This promotes laziness on the part of the parents. If that offends you, I'm sorry, but I have to speak directly on this matter, because rather than putting forth the effort to instill long-term discipline in your children by interacting with them on a regular basis, you are just giving them something that allows them to kind of go mindless and inactive so that you don't have to go to that hard work. And that deprives them of interaction with you, and it also deprives you of interaction with them. Basically, it is like Ritalin in electronic form. And so there is considerable harm to that in the long run, because what happens when they don't have that device? Well, then they're at a loss as to how to control their emotions, control their fidgeting, and entertain themselves. So that is one harm that comes up. The second harm is that it robs children of the opportunity to interact with adults in particular, and also with other children. If their face is planted permanently in some type of electronic device, then they never have to learn interpersonal skills, and they don't learn interpersonal skills. And so if you're at a dinner table or in a restaurant and your child is looking at a screen, they are going to miss out on that developmental necessity of being able to carry on a conversation, listen to a conversation, figure out what body language implies in various situations. All of those things are things that your child will learn over time through interaction, particularly with adults, but also with other children. So that's number two. Number three is that it robs your child of, as one of my friends put it, the blessing of boredom. So boredom is very good for a child for two reasons. First, it causes them to seek out other means of entertainment. I was the youngest of 8, and my next oldest sibling was a sister who was 6 years older than me. So basically, I was on my own as a child. It was not quite like being an only child, but almost. No one was interested in playing with me, for example, because I was too young. So I had to develop the ability to keep myself entertained. And partly I did this by developing my imagination. I would spend countless hours outside with a stick, which, depending on what scenario I had developed in my mind, was either a musket, a rifle, a spear, a harpoon. It served very many purposes. And I enjoyed myself. And probably explains one of the reasons why I'm very comfortable with being by myself for long periods of time now. The other thing that that experience gave me was a love for both music and for reading. And I would put on a record player. If you don't know what a record player is, you know what a record player is because they've come back. They're in vogue. But I would put on a record and I would read a book. And I developed a love for good books because it alleviated that boredom. And so giving your child an electronic device is just going to teach them that they should always be entertained, and they don't need to put any effort into entertaining themselves. And that is a disservice to them. And finally, the last harm that is done to a toddler is neurological in nature. I'm going to do a longer video on this later, but when your child is like from toddler age up to about 10, the biological psychologists tell us that that is a critical period for the developmental maturity in the brain, and that physical activity actually promotes the connection of synapses within the brain that increase a child's cognitive ability and also increases their coordination and their ability to interpret information and make quick decisions. We have a son he just turned 19, I think, but he was the youngest of 10, excuse me. And it was shocking to me how athletic he was at an early age. And a good portion of the reason for that was because he saw his older siblings do things and he tried to emulate them. And because of that, he developed very good motor skills at a very early age. And so if your child is glued to some type of electronic device, you are actually inhibiting their cognitive and physical development through that inactivity. So a cell phone or tablet for a toddler is not a harmless babysitter. It is something that is detrimental to their welfare. So what about teens? Well, there was a study by the American Academy of Pediatricians, and it found that children who had a cell phone of their own by age 12 had a significantly higher rate of depression, anxiety, and obesity. And that risk of or incidence of anxiety, depression, and obesity increased roughly 1% for each year prior to the age of 12, which they received that cell phone. And so cell phones are detrimental to teens as well. And it is interesting that they were very specific in acknowledging that they did not look at the content the teens were looking at on the cell phone. It was just having the cell phone caused them to be more likely to be depressed, anxious, and obese. It also contributed to sleep deprivation on the part of the teenagers. I have seen this among the athletes that I coach. I have had several reports of athletes who just get less than 5 hours sleep a night, and I am positive it is because they spend an inordinate amount of time on their cell phone. I mean, we go on a trip, and the first thing the athletes do in the morning is pick up that cell phone. They had to put them away at night because I forced them to put them away and go to sleep. But had I not done that, they would have stayed up who knows how late, interacting with their quote-unquote friends or playing a video game on their cell phone. So if you want your child to be less depressed, less anxious, less obese and function better because they're getting better sleep, then the thing to do is to take away their cell phone. So what about the psychological effect to young ladies in particular? Well, I oftentimes get in trouble. I always say, everybody has assumptions. I'm just willing to articulate mine. And I think my assumptions are largely based upon accurate observations of how the world works. So call me a sexist if you wish, but ladies tend to be more susceptible to anxiety because of what other people think of them than are young men. Young men are susceptible to that as well, but not to the same extent, I think, as young ladies are. And this is supported by some of the articles that I will link in the show notes about social media. In particular, one of them talks about a feature in Snapchat which allows the receiver of a message to read the message without marking the message as read. I don't use Snapchat, so I'm kind of speaking in generalities here. But the article talked about how that caused anxiety in young ladies because they would send a message to a boy they like, for example, and he hadn't read it. They could see that it was unread, and that created question, well, does he like me or does he not like me? And so there is this heightened sense of anxiety because of that. Also, there was a study done by Facebook, which owns Instagram, on the impact of Instagram upon young ladies. And surprisingly, guess what? It was not favorable. So it showed that Instagram was likely a contributor to higher anxiety, higher depression, and a lower self-image, I would call it self-confidence, on the part of ladies. And one of the young ladies who was interviewed in the article was having problems with an eating disorder, and she said she thought it was probably, if not caused by, at least aggravated by, the fact that she saw all these chiseled bodies, that is her term, on Facebook, with perfectly fashioned hair and the perfect outfit. And so she felt compelled to try to copy those images. These social media platforms give young ladies an artificial sense of what they should look like and contribute to their lack of self-confidence. Nobody on Instagram, at least nobody that I have seen so far, is getting thousands of followers because they're just so stinking smart, right? Particularly not ladies. I'm not saying ladies aren't smart. I'm just saying that is not accentuated and valued on Instagram. Now, you could say, well, those ladies should just get off Instagram. Well, yeah, they probably should. But they would be much more likely to get off it if they didn't have a cell phone. And so you have to say, how can I, as a parent, help my child in building better self-confidence and having an accurate assessment of what is valuable both to society as a whole and to your family in particular, so that they can function well and not get caught up in what I would call the race to the bottom, the focus solely upon one's physique and one's beauty, rather than their internal qualities, their intellect, their ability to interact with people, the charity that they are willing to engage in. All of those things are much more valuable and will serve the young lady in the long run better. How would you get them to focus on those things? Well, take away the cell phone so that they are not focused on the temporal and only on the physical. I have had in the past the job of trying to filter internet content at a local public library. And I can tell you that trying to filter out sexually explicit and pornographic images and videos is a Herculean task. It is very difficult. And it is more difficult when you have someone who is bound and detra-minded, as one of my daughters used to say, to usurp the controls that you have put in place. And so trying to keep teenage boys and pre-teenage boys from seeing sexually explicit material on their cell phone is very difficult. Okay. It's difficult if they are just on a Wi-Fi network, but you have no control over it. If, as an administrator of the Wi-Fi network, if they also have a cell phone plan that allows them to get a certain amount of data or even unlimited data from the cell phone network. So that is one problem. And it is further complicated by social media. So Instagram has an official policy saying that there can be no nudity upon their platform. That said, they either can't, which is not true, can't monitor that or don't monitor that, as an article I will post in the show notes says, probably because there's money involved. But all you have to do is know the search terms and you will find plenty of examples of nudity on Instagram. And as part of my track training programs, I sometimes scroll through Instagram to find workouts for my track athletes. And I've noticed something that either the algorithms or just the people have figured out, that if you are a beautiful, big busted babe, you're going to get more clicks on your exercise short than just some guy in gym trunks and a t-shirt. And once someone starts clicking on those, well, then the algorithm kicks into place and it starts providing more content that is similar to that. And so that begins to pull people down a rabbit hole. Would that be it? Kind of a toilet bowl? That would be a better way to depict it, perhaps. That can lead to trouble. And just as social media creates a false sense of reality in young ladies, so pornography creates a false sense of reality in young men. First and foremost, it causes young men to kind of view women not as humans, but as simply an object through which they can fulfill their sexual desires. And that problem is accentuated with kind of the advent of the Japanese animated pornography that creates these perverse and exaggerated caricatures of women that no woman alive exhibits as a means to try to stimulate more interest in their animated pornography. Because then young men begin to associate that with what would be the ideal sexual partner. Well, there's no sexual partner like that out there. And so I guess there's kind of a moral to this story. The moral is, if a young man was going to be looking at that animated pornography or actual photos of women, I would prefer he looked at photos of women, because at least there is a chance of him humanizing them. Very small chance, but there's some chance. He will just dehumanize women all the more if he is looking at the animated pornography. But I prefer he looked at none of that. The effect on young men's ability to interact with women, how they value women, their ability to have a long-term loving and compassionate sexual relationship with a wife is going to be impacted by the influence of pornography. And so, again, you could say, well, I put filters on my kids' phones to block out pornographic sites. Okay. Do you also put filters on your kids' phones to block out photo hosting sites? Because there's a whole host of photo and video hosting sites that have explicit material on them. And all your teenager has to do is click, yes, I'm over 18, and they have access to thousands upon thousands of photos of nude men and women on those sites. You could say, well, I'll monitor what my kid watches. Maybe, but that's a lot of work. And so are you going to do that over the long run? You might do that for a while, but after a while, you kind of begin to get lax in that. And that's not a complete accusation against any parent in particular. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. So the better approach would be no smartphone, no tablet, except for those that are used in a public area where they cannot access pornography without someone knowing that immediately. So I was speaking on this topic with one of my oldest daughters, and she brought up the concern that I have already mentioned before, that, parents like kids to have cell phones because it allows them to keep track of their kids. Okay. And the implication is that protects them from being abducted or some type of harm while they are out and about in the quote-unquote real world. But if you stop and think about it, I'm going to speak, ladies, to you in particular, and speak bluntly, really that is not true. A cell phone will not protect your child from being abducted because the bad guy gets to vote. And if a bad guy abducts your child, the first thing he is going to do is ditch the cell phone. And if he's smart, he'll toss it in the back of a pickup truck that is going the opposite direction that he's going, so that when you go to track it, you will be thrown off by the travel of the pickup truck. Or if you put one of those, what are the little pod things? Some of my track athletes, the younger ones, have these. Their parents keep track of them that way. They just open up an app, the bad guy does, make sure that there's not one of those tracking devices in the kid's possession. And if there is, they ditch that. So the electronics do not keep your child safe. The best way to keep your child safe is to teach them, first off, to go safe places, always tell you where they are going, tell you where they're, when they're going to be back, and tell you who they are going to hang out with. And if they violate those rules, the second three, impose significant consequences upon them that will motivate them not to violate those rules in the future. That will go a lot further than just handing your child a cell phone as if that is somehow going to keep them safe because you, quote unquote, know where they are. Now, having said that, we live in a rural part of the country, and my kids sometimes drive considerable distances, either by themselves or with other siblings. They don't do that now because they're not in the house, but they used to. And so in that case, the ability to get a hold of their parents is an advantage because they might have a car that breaks down. Possible they could get in an accident. I've had all of those things happen. And having a flip phone, not a smartphone, but a flip phone is a great advantage. So yes, put a flip phone in the car, but your child doesn't need to carry that with them all the time, because even a flip phone can expose your child to unwanted influences because you're not sure who your child is texting in the middle of the night. And you, as a parent, are going to find that really you are not as diligent as you hope to be in monitoring those types of activities because, again, it is just a time-consuming task. And your children are also smart. They can also delete text messages. So, unless you're going to monitor the text messages on the actual cell phone carrier's service, then they may be able to keep you in the dark. So, take steps to discipline your kids and make sure that they tell you where they're going, who they're going to be with, and when they'll be back, and then hold them to those statements. And you will find that your kids are safe. But it's going to require some work on your part, right? You can't just do what many parents do now, give their kids a cell phone and then just absolve themselves of all responsibility because, well, they have a cell phone. They can call me if they need help. No, you're going to have to perhaps go pick them up. You're going to have to arrange a time, and it may be inconvenient to you, but in the long run, it will be worth it. To wrap this up, in one of the articles, I think it was a Snapchat article that I will put in the show notes, I was reading, it was in the Wall Street Journal, and I was reading the comments of parents and grandparents in response to this article that talked about all the detrimental psychological effects that social media had upon young girls. And there was just this inordinate amount of hand-wringing that was going on. Gosh, what are we to do about this? This is just an intractable problem. I mean, our kids are in trouble. And I put a comment in there in which I quoted Edna Mode from The Incredibles.
What are you talking about? You are Elastigirl! My God, pull yourself together! What will you do? Is this a question?
You are the parents. We've had like it. Take the welfare of your daughters and your sons to heart and do something. And my advice to you would be to get rid of the cell phones. Now, I had one fellow reader at the Wall Street Journal who commented in response to my comment, well, perhaps their welfare includes having a social life. I wish I were making this up. I really do. But that is what he said. And I was, did you read the article? Does that sound like a social life to you? That is not a social life. A social life is where you actually like sit down and visit with friends and go out and engage in activities with them. That's a social life. Snapchat is not a social life. And I think if I would have had opportunity to interact with that individual, I would have found probably one of maybe three things. So first, he probably did not want to undertake the rather unpleasant job of disciplining his kids, his daughters in particular in this case. If you take away your kid's cell phone, are they going to whine? Yes. Are they going to complain? Yes. Are they going to say, but I need that? Yes, they are. It doesn't matter. You are the parent. You're the one who needs to bring the more mature judgment to the conversation and say, really, this thing is harmful for you. You have better stuff to do with your time. It will improve your social life in the long run. No, we're getting rid of this. Okay, so that's the first thing, that he didn't want to have those conversations. The second one is he might have been worried about what his daughter would think of him, or what his daughter's friends would think of him, or what his daughter's friends' parents would think of him if he took away the cell phone. My mom was a school teacher, and she limited me to 1 hour of television a night. That started basically from junior high, I think, through high school. At first, I was like, wailing about that. 1 hour of television? But now I am so thankful for that because, again, it got me more involved in music. It made me more active. I'd go outside and do stuff. And I read a lot more because of it. And my friends thought my mom was a shrew for doing that. My mom did not care what anyone thought of her. Her concern was for my welfare, and so she imposed that rule and enforced it consistently. And she did so to my benefit. And then the last reason why that individual might have posted that response is he was just lazy. Yet giving a child a cell phone is the lazy parent's way of parenting. You're not really parenting. You're just kind of providing meals for this kid and allowing them to vegetate with their electronic device. And it is going to have a negative effect on your children. We've had 3 of our 10 kids had cell phones in high school. And we had problems with 2 of them. The youngest one of our 10 admitted to me, hey, yeah, a lot of these problems I'm having are because of the cell phone, and actually suggested that we severely limit his use of the cell phone. And I probably did not limit it enough. In retrospect, I would have said, hey, you guys do not need cell phones. Even though we tried to limit it and monitor them, we still had problems. So my encouragement to you is just do what seems to be the Stone Age thing. Take those cell phones away. get yourself a flip phone that is on some type of temporary plan. And when your kid is going someplace where they might need a phone, you hand them that and say, okay, call me at such and such a time and I will come pick you up. Or if you run into problems, let me know. But they don't need their own cell phone. We've had kids for millennia who have survived without their own cell phone, and kids today can do the same. It's a hard thing to do, but you will benefit from it. Your kids will benefit from it. And when they get out of the house, they'll thank you for that because they will be better adjusted adults by having been disciplined by you and by the love that you show them by taking that thing away. So feel free to put your comments in the comments section. I may respond to them. I may not on this topic because it's a pretty hot topic, but reasonable comments I'll respond to. If this has been helpful, share it with people, like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on Parenting for the Long Run.